Welcome back to Weekend Warrior Workshop DIY, where we get things done. I'm so glad you've joined me in this video. In part 1, we reviewed the demo work, so if you're interested in that, there will be a link at the end of this video. In part 2, we're going to start to get ready for tile. We wanted to have the entire wall covered in subway tile, so I started by adding backer board to the wall. After doing some research, I did decide to use Hardy backer board. It's a type of cement board that you can find at your local big box store. As you see here, I covered the entire wall with this backer board, and it installs very similar to drywall. However, there are some differences, and I'll explain that a little later in this video. After installing this, I put in the upper cabinets in the corner. This was one of the major improvements we did, adding much needed storage. If you remember from part 1, the medicine cabinet used to be the window to the backyard. This was before the previous owner added on to the house at some point and closed it in. The edge of this old window was about 4 to 5 inches from the corner, and the upper cabinet was about 12 inches deep. So this required me to do a little framing to help support mounting the cabinet and close off the front, turning it from a 2-door opening to a single door. My wife and I really liked this arch towards the top of the shower. It really had that character of the house that we really enjoyed, and we wanted to make sure and keep this and incorporate it into our new design. At this point, I moved the framing in for the niche on the side wall, as well as the smaller soap niche on the plumbing wall. When I added the framing for the niche, I made sure to use a level across several studs, ensuring that there would not be any waviness in the wall once I added the backer board. You can do this by setting your level across, say, 3 studs, and if you have any gap in that middle, whether it sticks out or goes in, your level will either stay straight or it'll rock. And if it does one of those, if it either has a gap or it rocks, you need to adjust for that, because when you put your backer board on, it will have a waviness because it's going to sink in or push out that backer board, and you want it nice and straight. While I was checking the new studs I installed, I went ahead and double checked all the original remaining studs. I had to apply a few shims on one stud so that the backer board would not be wavy once I installed it. It was around a 1/4 inch off, so I went ahead and shimmed it up, and the backer board turned out really nice. Also, something to consider when framing up the niche: make sure your bottom board is not level. It needs to slope slightly towards the front, as if water would fall in the shower. This creates a slope, so if water does get in the niche, which it will, it's a shower, it'll fall into the shower and then into the drain. If you create it flat, you kind of risk water puddling and probably making mold, mildew in the grout lines and probably the corner of your niches. So make sure you slope it to avoid that. At this point, I was ready to install the backer board. And when installing the backer board, make sure to use the correct screws. When you're on a budget, you might be tempted to use less expensive screws like sheetrock screws, but don't. You'll definitely regret it. The screws to use, they need to have a special coating on them to resist the corrosion. They're going to be going through cement. It's a moisture area. You want to make sure to use these correct screws. You'd hate to invest all this money and then it get destroyed, off of really relatively low cost of screws. So don't use regular sheetrock screws. You'll be able to find them right next to the backer board in your local big box store. I'll show a picture here. Additionally, these screws also have little fins on the under part of their heads, and this helps them to countersink into the backer board. You want to make sure that you don't have the screws head above the surface of the board. They really need to sink in slightly below the surface. Once I had all the backer board installed in the entire bathroom, I used the cement board seam tape in all the corners and where any 2 pieces met. I installed the tape and mortared over the joints, being sure to try to create as smooth a surface as possible. If you've ever drywalled, it's really similar to doing the seams on those. You're just using different materials. Where the backer board met the original plaster wall at the top, I used a 3M product, I'll show a picture here, that was similar to a joint compound. This was a special lightweight product that contained fibers to help strengthen it, and I was really happy with how it went on and how strong it was once it dried. It sanded out just like regular joint compound. Just to clarify, when you screw in the backer board sheets, the material around the screw kind of mushrooms out the edges. kind of similar to like when I try to fit in jeans a couple sizes too small. Well, the back of that screw has those fins that bore out the material, and it kind of mushrooms out the side. So I just used my 6-inch putty knife, I'll show a picture here, and I scraped it over the wall, and it easily knocked off those mushroom heads. And it also let me know if I didn't sink the screw in deep enough. I would hear the putty knife clink against the metal head. So I just grabbed my drill, drilled them a little deeper, and then double checked that that mushroom head was scraped off. Well, on the frugal side of me, I had some cement board left over from another project that was enough material to cover the floor. So I used it here, installing it similar to the Hardybacker board on the wall. I'm no chemistry expert, so I'm not sure if you have to buy and use the cement board screws instead of the Hardybacker screws. In my suspicious nature, I think it's just a way for them to earn some extra money, but my uneducated side didn't want to risk it. So I gave in and bought the cement screws to use on the floor. They looked similar, but there were some slight differences in the threads, and they were different colors, but I believe they had the coating, which is the important part. So let me know in the comments if it would have been okay for me to use the Hardybacker screws on the cement board. My hunch is yes, since Hardybacker board is a type of cement board, but let me know what you think. You can also see here I installed the lower cabinets. If you remember from part 1, this narrow bathroom came with 12-inch lower cabinets, and we needed to keep it that way with the new one as well, since the bathroom's so narrow. If we installed regular lower cabinets, they would just stick out too much, creating a really narrow walkway. And we have 2 girls and a boy that need to share this bathroom getting ready in the morning, so we wanted to make sure to have enough space for them. Since the upper cabinets are not set up with the toe kip, I built a little platform out of 2x4s for the cabinet to sit on, making sure to do a couple inches narrower, and I also subtracted out the width of the baseboard that I'll install later. At this point, I was ready to begin waterproofing the backer board. I elected to go with Red Guard that you can find at Home Depot. Lowe's has a similar product that is blue. However, this Red Guard claims it can be used in a shower pan, so I figured it might be a little stronger. I also figured if it's strong enough for a floor, well, it'll definitely be enough for these walls. Also, in doing some research, I came across Cy DeBlasi. He's an amazing tiler here on YouTube. I'll link his channel in the description. And if you're planning on doing any tile jobs, I highly recommend checking out his channel. He is truly amazing, and he does a great job explaining in detail where someone even like me can take on a task like this. I believe he lives on the East Coast of the United States, where it's much more humid conditions and they have stricter building codes. He uses a fiber tape, I believe it's fiberglass tape, where applying the waterproofing membrane whenever there's a change in a plane. So even though my building code did not require it, I felt it was the right thing to do. I guess cheap insurance. Since it's not required in my local area, I could not find it at any of my local big box stores, but I did find it on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. He explains in some areas it's okay to put tile directly on backerboard or sheetrock, but unless you want to redo your bathroom within 10 years, I do not recommend this. However, I guess if you're someone who changes every 5 years with the change of styles and your building code would allow it, then I guess go for it. Save a little extra money, but I'm trying to build a bathroom here that will outlast me. So in doing all my research, I just felt like this was the right thing to do. Before I started applying the Red Guard, I made sure to cut all the pieces of the fiber tape that I would need. I cut for the verticals, the horizontals, and then I needed to make sure I had all the corners cut for the niches as well. In each corner of the niche, I cut a square piece and I folded it in half twice, creating a square around the quarter the size of the original square. I then unfolded and cut one of those creases to the center, and this allowed me to then fold it over, overlapping one of them and creating this 3D corner piece. I'll show you here in this picture. I used up all the tape, so I found a similar material in my garage to model for you here in these pictures. I repeated this for all of the 8 corners. I then did the same for the front corners, but instead of folding it in on itself, I folded it outwards, overlapping onto the walls of the shower. Once I had all my pieces cut, I was ready to go. Now that I was ready to install the Red Guard, I used the cheap disposable paintbrush to apply it. I put a small coat down where I was going to put the tape, and then I applied the tape over it. And once the tape was down, I then applied another layer of the RedGuard over the top. Doing it this way ensured the membrane was saturated into the tape. And once dried, it created a very strong but flexible joint. Once I did this for the niches, I then continued to do this for the corners of the showers as well, following the same method, making sure that I had my tape cut out before, ready to go before I applied it. Once I had all the edging and corners done with the brush, I then used a small paint roller that had a really thick mat on it. I just dipped the roller straight into the RedGuard bucket and then applied it on the wall, and it goes on really similar to paint. It's just really thick. It's very almost like a gel substance. When you apply RedGuard, it goes on a slight pink color, but you'll definitely know when it dries because it turns to a darker red. Wherever you put the tape is usually the last to dry just because it's a little thicker. And so once that turns from the pink to the dark red, then you're ready to go putting the next coat on. I ended up putting on 4 coats. I know it's a little overkill, but I'd rather go over than under. Once I was done waterproofing, I was ready to begin tiling the back of the niches. We're using an accent tile. And this was at the point of the project. I always look back, and this is one of those steps that I probably would do different if I had to do over again. So I'll just share that with you. I installed the back tile first and then the bottom. But if you kind of similar to roofing, if I would have installed the bottom tile first and then the back tile, if water hits the back and then flows down to the bottom tile, it would then roll out. But with all the waterproofing I did in the corners and it slopes forward, water will still find its way out. But in my head, I would have felt better about it. Since this project, I've done some research and I've seen people do it both ways. The important part is I waterproofed, so I'm okay. But I just wanted to share with you that if I did have to do over, I would do that differently. Well, that concludes this video on part 2 of the bathroom remodel. I so hope you enjoyed it. Come back next time where I'll go over installing the subway tile. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see part 3, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you think it's worth sharing, share it with a friend. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to see you on the next video. Have a great day.